There are some very solid arguments as to why Jon Jones will beat Ciryl Gane at UFC 285. However, I feel like the people that are picking Jon Jones aren't making those arguments, and instead they're making just some absolute ridiculous statements about Jon Jones that they only make about Jon Jones. And it's almost like a bit of an insurance policy to where if Jon Jones doesn't look good or loses, it means he was bored and didn't really care about the matchup. But if Jon Jones doesn't look good and then somehow gets a finish at one moment or just wins the fight in general, then it's the real Jon Jones that showed up on that night. And I'm going to play this video for you guys today, and we're going to talk about some of the points that Dan Hardy made in his breakdown of the Jones versus Gane fight. We're starting straight away right here.
Okay, now here's my argument.
Go on then.
This is his co-host on the show.
If you would have not watched Jon Jones when he was 23, and you would have just watched his last 3 fights, would your opinion be different?
Very important argument, because the Jon Jones that has fought recently has looked like a person who will be 100% beaten by Ciryl Gane. Very important. Now, if people who are picking Jon Jones admit this fact, then they have to pick Ciryl Gane to beat Jon Jones. Look how he looked against Dominic Reyes. Look how he looked against Thiago Santos. They can make an argument he can still beat Ciryl Gane. However, this really will make their argument not so strong. So how do they get around admitting this? How do they get around the idea of taking Jones from what we've seen of him over his last few performances?
Yeah, but
Not even mentioning the 3 years out or whatever, because that just depends on the person. So, his last 3 performances, would you just be like, oh, that's the same person?
if that was just a fight and it was like, well, I mean, it's difficult.
So it's a very, very, very problematic question for people that are picking Jon Jones. What about his last few performances? It's a very problematic question for them. We'll see how they get around it. You know what I mean? And we'll see how Dan Hardy answers this question.
Difficult to say, because the thing is, I can't not take into account the fact that they were title defenses, that he'd been defending his title for years, that he wasn't really bothered about fighting them.
He wasn't really bothered about fighting them. His title on the line, legacy on the line. If he loses those fights, he is no longer the GOAT of the sport anymore. Wasn't really bothered about those ones. This is the language I really despise when it comes to people talking about Jon Jones. He wasn't really bothered about those. He didn't care about those matchups.
Like, it just seemed like against Anthony Smith, it was just a dismantling. But Anthony Smith just shut down and didn't do anything.
Yeah, but
Right.
then Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, and Dominic Reyes have gone on pretty big losing streaks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
there's somebody in the comments about arguing about the fact that Dominic Reyes potentially beat him on the scorecard.
Which he did. Dominic Reyes did beat Jon Jones. But let's see what Dan Hardy thinks about the Jon Jones versus Dominic Reyes fight. You ready? Let's see what Dan Hardy thinks about people saying that Dominic Reyes beat Jon Jones.
Scorecard. I didn't think so.
He didn't think so. Dan Hardy doesn't think Dominic Reyes beat Jon Jones. This is the linguist. This is the mind games that they play to allow them to pick Jon Jones in the way that they want to. Okay, it's a very big gamble from them, but they're hoping for it to pay off this weekend. Is all I'm gonna say. Very big gamble from them. Okay, to play this game, to roll the dice on Jon Jones and be able to talk about him the way they want to. But we'll see if it pays off. Now, why didn't Dominic Reyes beat Jon Jones, Dan Hardy? He doesn't think so.
Scorecard. I didn't think so. I thought Jon Jones, he allowed that fight to go the distance when really it didn't need to.
He allowed that fight to go the distance when really he didn't need to. He allowed the Dominic Reyes fight to go to the distance when really he didn't need to. So why did he let it happen then? Are we seriously under the impression here that Jon Jones is this divine mythological creature who in a cage fight whilst losing to Dominic Reyes is just like, nah, I'll let it go to a decision and gamble. Gamble, basically, if you're being objective about it, he had basically a 30% chance of getting that decision because of how clearly Dominic Reyes won that fight. So they're telling us that Jon Jones was in the middle of that fight thinking, I'll just let him go to a decision. I don't really feel like finishing. I could finish Dominic Reyes right now in front of millions of people and have the glory and defend my belt after losing the first 3 rounds. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to let this go to a decision and gamble my legacy. Gamble my world title. Put everything on the line because I'm just not interested by this. I'll let it go to a decision.
If Jon Jones was focused and as mean and as creative as he was when he was enjoying his career, because he didn't look like he was enjoying himself too much in those last few fights.
Because he wasn't having success. And I'll tell you what right now. People that say this about Jon Jones, have you only watched his highlight reel? Looked exactly the same against Rashad Evans, except he was ahead on the scorecards. Like, the Rashad Evans fight was like, the Vitor Belfort fight was nothing too crazy until he escaped the armbar and then finished Vitor Belfort later on with the key lock. Like, it's just, I don't understand people, the spinning elbow against this guy. Like, they talk about his old performances, but they miss out a few of the performances. The Rampage Jackson performance was like, and then he got the finish with a rear naked choke. So that means, because he finished him with a rear naked choke, that was the focused Jon Jones. You know what I mean? Whereas the performance against Rashad Evans, he literally just picked at him at range for 5 rounds and didn't do much of anything. And just sort of coasted out a decision win against Rashad Evans. I know it was DC, but he did the same thing in the first DC fight as well. Just sort of picked him at range, went 5 rounds. It wasn't like a crazy war. He wasn't beating DC up like destroying DC. 10-8 rounds in that fight. That didn't happen. So I feel like it's very weird how people remember his earlier career. Like, it wasn't just this Jon Jones who was destroying everyone and absolutely brutalizing everyone, and then all of a sudden he got bored. Like, he had those performances where opponents were good enough to bring that performance out of him and make him look quite mediocre, early in his career as well as recently.
No, of course. And
like the Smith fight was dominant, but even so, it didn't look like it's same as his fight against OSP.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he didn't want to fight OSP. He wanted to fight Cormier. Right?
Yeah.
But because Cormier wasn't there, he got OSP stepped in short notice and he just coasted. It was a very lackluster performance, and I felt like it was the same against Santos and the same against Reyes.
He wasn't coasting though, because he was arguably behind in the Reyes fight. Reyes was bringing the fight to him. So it's not like I'm just coasting, staying ahead, doing my thing, easily winning. He was losing the Reyes fight, so it wasn't coasting. And again, you talk about, the performance he had against OSP. He looked very similar against Rashad Evans. You know? It was very similar. It's like, whenever Jones destroys someone, there's the real Jon Jones. Whenever Jones is given a tough fight, it's like, he was bored. He didn't even want to win. Whenever he has like a mediocre performance over 5 rounds, it's, he was just coasting, he just let it go to a decision. It's like, it's never about what the opponent brings to the table. It's always about Jones. Like, no, how about some opponents have the ability to take Jon Jones to the wire and arguably beat him? Some opponents have the ability to be calm and patient enough to not let him bully them, and they can go 5 rounds with him. And some opponents can't, and they get destroyed because, I don't know, they're fat middleweights. We move on.
Yeah.
And I think he feels the same because in another dimension, Jon Jones stops all 3 of them. He stops all 3 of them. Stops Anthony Smith up against the fence with elbows or a guillotine up against the fence. He TKOs Santos and Reyes. Yeah. I can't.
It's just like, whatever, like, that's his answer to, what about his last few performances? In another universe, in another dimension, he beats all of them and finishes all of them. He let them go to a decision. Like, all this mental gymnastics, like, just say, you think Jon Jones' skill set at light heavyweight, despite some really close fights, with his frame and size, will be really, really applicable to the heavyweight division. And Ciryl Gane, arguably, you can make this argument, has only looked good because he's been moving against fat, flat-footed heavyweights. And Jon Jones is going to make that look very different, and he'll be able to get a takedown and get a submission. I hate this, like, I don't like the mind games of the picks that they're making.
Can't make an argument for any of those guys being better than Jon Jones.
I'm not.
You can't make an argument that they're better, but you can make an argument that Dominic Reyes won, and Jones isn't completely untouchable, and he can be beaten. You know what I mean? And he's not just bored. And he just coasted. He let it go to a decision whenever it does go there. We move on to another moment, which is at 1 minute 49:40 on the clock. Oh, God, I'm going to have to manually skip here. Here we go.
Being a heavyweight.
Is that he's had time off and he's grown into the division.
No, but him coming back into... Let's say he had time off and he came back to light heavyweight. Why is...
I won't be as...
You know what I mean? Let's say he had time off, this same time off to rejuvenate, and came back to light heavyweight. What do you think about that?
Why is...
I won't be as interested because I don't feel like the light heavyweight division's as interesting for him. And I also...
Why isn't it? Because there's still... Dominic Reyes beat him. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's not as interesting as the heavyweight division. Obviously, it's not. But it's like there's still matchups there that are like, oh, I don't know. That's an interesting matchup for Jon Jones. He doesn't just come back and destroy the whole light heavyweight division.
I feel like part of the reason why his performances were so lackluster is because he was having to keep his weight down at 205.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think Jones is a natural heavyweight. I think Jones is naturally a skinny person. And he was also trying to keep his weight down when he was coming up at 205 as well, against the Shoguns and the Rampage and all these performances that people want to talk about. He also had to keep his weight down there, and he was partying way more back in the day than he was now. So it's just like, all right, I feel like he's a natural skinny guy. I don't think the weight cut is really limiting Jon Jones's performance. I think his size advantage that he gets from the weight cut and his frame are the only things that sort of keep him afloat at light heavyweight at times, especially recently.
Yeah, that could make sense. But
Right.
now has gone up to the fact that he's like he's not as agile as he was before, and that just
For
goes
sure.
to any like. If I go up 40 pounds, I'm not going to be agile.
No, for sure. Okay. But let's say this, right? You've got puppy Jon Jones,
Yeah.
who didn't kind of know what to do with his limbs, but was still knocking Stephan Bonnar out with spinning elbows and was still able to win the championship, even though he was just trying to kind of figure out like how his body moves as an MMA fighter.
Mm-hmm.
He even said this in one of his post-fight interviews. He was like, I'm starting to understand what it feels to be an MMA fighter now.
And since he became that way and less wild, he became way more composed, and he adopted his new style of being way more patient, picking shots at range, and he had the Rashad Evans performance. And the Rampage performance, which again, he's had performances where, with a finish at the end or not, people I truly believe haven't watched Jones's full fights. They just see the highlight and go, wow, he looked great in that one. Like, he had these lackluster performances against other opponents and then got a finish at the end. Like, he had these switched off performances where he just sort of picked at them at range. You know, it wasn't like he was destroying Rampage. 3 10-8 rounds in a row against Rampage, and then he got the submission. No, it wasn't like that. He was just outpointing him at range. And then the Rashad fight was a similar story as well.
Right, so you take that wild and creative Jon Jones, then you put 5 years of kind of boredom and not interested in fighting the contenders that are coming, aside from Daniel Cormier,
Because he head kicked him and KO'd him. Because if he didn't head kick and KO DC and he went to a decision, people wouldn't be saying that he wasn't bored for that one, I bet you. You know what I mean? Like, and then you add in all the boredom that he had against the other contenders, other than DC because he got a finish there. Like, that one head kick means that Jones wasn't bored. And I don't think he's bored in any of those matchups. You know what I mean? But to them, it's like, oh, he got a head kick, so he wasn't bored in that one. He was switched on and focused for that one. He got a head kick. You know what I mean?
not interested in fighting the contenders that are coming, aside from Daniel Cormier, because there was the nice little bit of needle there.
Yeah, it was a nice little bit of needle. You mean that fight he tested positive for? It's almost like Jones early on, when USADA wasn't around, was better. And then the only good performance he's had since then was when he popped for PEDs against DC in the rematch. Because even the first DC fight was like, wasn't that much of a great performance. And that first DC fight was when the story came out about him hiding under the cage. So it's just like...
And then you put him in these fights against Reyes and Smith and Santos, where he doesn't really want to be there. He doesn't feel threatened by these guys.
Yeah.
Reyes was battering him. He doesn't feel... He's acting like he was just coasting in that fight. La-di-da. I'm winning the fight. Reyes was smashing him in the first few rounds of that fight. Rocking him up against a cage. Really having him panicked on his heels. Santos was like knocking his mouthpiece out on one leg. Like, it's just... I don't understand these takes about it.
Yeah.
Right? But what we did see with Jon Jones is to pull his work rate back, be a lot more stationary, a lot less dynamic, and still just as brutal. So then you take that version of Jon Jones that we saw against Reyes and Santos and Smith, and then you build him into a 250-pound heavyweight monster that's been out for 3 years, and he's like, just fucking get me back in there, because these heavyweights don't stand a chance.
Yeah.
If I'm Jon Jones...
Like, it's a really weird mental gymnastics that you have to play here. You take this version of Jon Jones, but that version was against Shogun at the time, who's been around for so long. And I know he was still the champ back then, but he's a middleweight, man. You know what I mean? He's not a big dude. And it's just like, it's so annoying to listen to. You take this version from this and that version from this and put it into this. And then you bulk him up to a monster at heavyweight, which, by the way, he's got a pot belly. We just saw it on Embedded. It's like there's so much that they have to put together to have their argument of Jon Jones winning. Just say you think Jon Jones' patient, orthodox style of striking with some weird kicks mixed in is going to be too much for Gane, and I think he can score a takedown at some moment. And I think Gane's not quite there on the ground, and Jones will have a jiu-jitsu advantage because like heavyweight jiu-jitsu is way better than heavyweight jiu-jitsu, and he'll sub him. But there's like this gamble and this delusion around Jones, like where if Jones wins, all of this will seem right, even though it's not, and that's what they're gambling on, and it sucks to listen to, in my opinion, because I've watched all of his fights. It's just like, 152, 17 on the clock.
He's 40, and he's 6'1".
Yeah,
like,
but
what
you
you
have
do
like
is
Jamal Hill coming in, and Yuri Prohashka is an interesting fight.
But I don't think they are.
They are interesting though, because the same factor that even your delusion brings into it of he'll be bored in those matchups would make them fun. You know what I mean? If Jon Jones is truly bored against all these light heavyweight contenders, then he'll be bored against Yuri and Jamal Hill as well, and they'll also have a solid chance of beating him. He'll be bored against them, and they'll have a solid chance of beating him. Like Dominic Reyes beat him. You know what I mean? All of these guys looked worse against the contenders on the rise than they did against Jon Jones. And it wasn't this Jon Jones where you're not the same after fighting Jon Jones. He didn't do anything to him, other than Santos with his leg. But for Dominic Reyes, Jones, if anything, just raised his confidence because Reyes knew he beat him.
I don't think they are, really. Like I think Jamal Hills would be interesting if you give him another 5 years to grow into being a light heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
But Jon Jones, as a light heavyweight right now, you give him back the height and reach advantage, as well as that mean creativity and 25 fights experience, 28 fights experience. I just think he's too much at light heavyweight.
But you've just been making excuses as to why the recent version of Jon Jones didn't look good at light heavyweight. It's just such a mental... It's like, can we get an answer out of this? Why does Jon Jones beat Ciryl Gane? And it's just such a contingency for this. And like, he's got to have 10 examples for this. And then it goes back on that word for this. And it's just like, it's just a mental, chaotic thing. I don't understand. I'm just confused by everything when I see people describe why Jones is going to win. There's such a solid set of arguments, and none of them are making it. They're all just saying like he was bored whenever he looked beatable. Because if they admit that Jon Jones was who Jon Jones is when he fought Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos and Anthony Smith, they know they should be picking Ciryl Gane to beat him, in my opinion. We move on to another topic, which is at 153.05.
Difference, again, like if he stepped in there against Ngannou, he would be fighting someone who unequivocally has a better punching power than Jon Jones. Like, I feel like Jones and Ciryl Gane might be a little bit on an even footing, but I'm still edging towards Jon Jones for two reasons. One, Cyryl's got really nice straight punching.
He does have nice straight punching.
But as soon as it comes to power punch, trying to get a finish, he's straight armed and he's swinging it from right behind him. Like, think about the strikes he was landing against Taito Ivasa up against the fence.
Yeah, that's a bit
He's
weird.
like swinging them because he can't generate power.
He can. The shot that he rocked, these are shots that he's landed on Taito Ivasa. And there's another problem I have with this. Like, stop diminishing Gane. You have to bring Gane down a level so you can justify your pick over Jones. He's swinging those shots when he's finished an opponent. Before he's finished that opponent, the shots are crisp and polished. The shot that he landed onto Ivasa to rock him in the first place, that really showed his power, was from his chin. He swiveled out, pivoted, and landed a perfect right hand straight on the chin of Taito Ivasa. No big wind-up or anything like that. It was a perfect shot as he circled out after Tuivasa ran forward at him. And he clipped him right on the chin and hurt him and wobbled him. And that's Taito Ivasa. He then starts swinging against Tuivasa to put him away because he's already got a finished opponent in front of him. Until then, he's solid with his straight punches. You know what I mean? He's not swinging his KO blows from the hip to KO people. He's doing that once he has a guy hurt, like when he was trying to finish Derek Lewis on the ground. The way he was swinging them. They're just finishing blows. He can land his straight right and get a reaction out of someone. We saw it on Tuivasa. And I feel like it's weird to bring up power when you're discussing Jon Jones because the dude has zero.
He can get power for his size, but not the power of a heavyweight, not compared to Ngannou.
Yeah.
No one other than Pavlovich has power at heavyweight compared to Ngannou.
And then you've got Jon Jones, and from what it looks like on the Countdown show, he did 5 reps with 140 kilos on his bench. And he looks thick, he looks powerful.
So we're comparing Gane's lack of power, and then you've got Jon Jones, who's benching 140 kg. We're really bringing up Jon Jones's bench to discuss how much punch power he's going to have compared to Ciryl Gane. That's really what we're doing here. It's just like, there's so many good arguments, and these are none of the arguments to make.
Power for his size, but not the power of a heavyweight, not compared to Ngannou.
Yeah.
And then you've got Jon Jones.
And then you got Jon Jones on the other hand, now that we've diminished Ciryl Gane's power punching skills.
And from what it looks like on the Countdown show, he did 5 reps with 140 kilos on his bench.
That's not that beyond crazy, but it is a very, very high amount of weight. But to bring up someone's bench after discussing the power of Gane compared to Jon Jones is just straight up silly. On the Countdown, he looked like he benched about 140 kg 5 times. And that's the argument for his power. Okay.
And he looks thick. He looks powerful.
Yeah, but then he's going to be as agile.
It doesn't matter. Because now he's a heavyweight. It doesn't.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he's not as agile. Like, it's like a panicked, like, oh, you're going to... Wait, you'll beat me if it's about that. It doesn't matter if it's about... It doesn't matter if he's agile or not. What will I say now to justify why it doesn't matter if he's not agile or not a heavyweight against one of the most agile heavyweights ever in Ciryl Gane?
Like, the way to beat Ciryl Gane is not to out Ciryl Gane.
True.
The way that Jon Jones beats Ciryl Gane is to walk him down like a heavyweight power puncher and beat him up. With the...
Walk him down like a heavyweight power puncher and beat him up. I just don't see it. The way that Jon Jones beats Ciryl Gane is to play the Gane game on the offense and find his moment for a takedown. And then after he's found that takedown, either finish Ciryl Gane or do enough work on Ciryl Gane to where he's going to be exhausted when he gets back up to where then Jon Jones can start beating him up. It's not to walk him down as a heavyweight power puncher and beat him up. That's not how he win. Jon Jones, do not listen if you want to win this. You got to play the game, pick at Ciryl Gane, be a bit aggressive. You do not walk into Gane's range as a power puncher, knowing how you looked against Reyes and Santos and all that. It's not going to work out the same way.
Side kicks to the body and the leg and elbows crashing around the sides, which at light heavyweight were damaging. At heavyweight, they're going to be devastating.
How were they damaging at light heavyweight? No one felt any of Jones' punches, ever, or any of his moves. Sorry. We move on.
And I feel like the 3 years out with the excitement that he's got coming back. Like, he installed a gym in his house a couple of months before pandemic.
Oh my God, he's got a gym in his house? That's fucking crazy, dude. I guess I beat Ciryl Gane as well. 1:57:13 on the clock. Sorry, you understand why this has annoyed me so much. It's just the arguments are so there, but no one's making them right.
Are outstanding wrestlers.
Yeah, for sure. But on the flip side, Jon Jones showed you his training partners and he showed you footage of him manhandling them.
Wow, Walt Harris? That's crazy. Maurice Green? Jorgen De Castro? No way, dude. He beat them? There's no way. He just didn't. I don't believe you. He beat Walt Harris, who hasn't fought in about 2 fucking years. I don't even know if he's going to fight ever again. Oh my God, dude. Maurice Green? There's no way he beat Maurice Green in sparring. Manhandled them as well is weird.
One trip that lasted 5 seconds.
And I totally believed that he could take down Ciryl Gane with that same takedown. Especially because, Ciryl Gane's...
He totally believes he can take down Ciryl Gane. It was one trip, basically, it got shown. And Dan Hardy's like, manhandling his sparring partners. And this is why he can do it to Ciryl Gane if he can do it to Walt Harris.
247, Ciryl is.
Yeah.
Walt Harris is like 300, 315 pounds in that video.
But
because he's completely out of shape. 315 pounds. Because he's completely out of shape. The size of an opponent does not dictate if you can hit a sweep on them or not. It might come into play a little bit, but Walt Harris is flat-footed, probably exhausted after a minute of sparring, and Ciryl Gane's going to be light on his feet, agile in and out. He's not going to be getting hit by running sweeps off of Jon Jones. And if he is, he'll pop back up athletically as well. Compared to Walt Harris, who'll probably have a fucking cardiac arrest on the ground. Like Wings of Redemption. We move on to something else at 2 hours into this video. 1 minute and 40 seconds. Jesus, I've gone way past it.
Just like when you bring up Shogun Rua being incredible, you bring up Shogun Rua in Pride shorts.
He's out of shot.
Very good point. You know what I mean? Whenever he brings up when people bring up Shogun being good, they bring him up in Pride. When people bring up Jones being good, they bring up him beating Shogun when he was earlier on in his career. And it's just like, when do people not know? Ciryl Gane is the new one. He's the Jon Jones coming up to beat the guy on the top at the moment who's been on the top for a while. Looked a bit weird recently, but he had his heyday. You know what I mean? Shogun's Pride is Jon Jones's rise when he was in his prime. You know what I mean? He was on the source before USADA was around. And he was doing all that athletic stuff. But now he's not. And then there's a new guy that comes along. You know what I mean? Jon Jones beating his contenders on the way up to Shogun is Ciryl Gane beating Derek Lewis and Junior Dos Santos. Like, it's just, history repeats itself, and I don't know why they can't get that. I'm definitely taking Ciryl Gane. We move on to another moment. 2 hours, 2 minutes and 25. Jeez, I'm skipping past a lot of it.
Is he going to
Here we
care?
go.
We don't know.
Pyro Cham. Jon Jones was dominating fighters from a different era in MMA. Yeah, he was.
Very different era in MMA.
He was, absolutely. But he was dominating Rampage and Machida and Shogun and Vitor Belfort when he was 22, 23, 24 years old. Like, you can't take that out of the equation. You've got...
And it's also in the equation for Gane. Because people talk about how young Jones was, but it's not about the youth of Jon Jones. It's about it was about how young he was into the game of MMA. That's what it's really about. Ciryl Gane is as young as Jon Jones is into MMA. Dude didn't start I don't even know when Ciryl Gane started MMA, but it feels like it's less than 5 years ago or around 5 years ago. It's not like the youth of Jon Jones and how young he was. It's like how new he was to the game. That's what's impressive about him beating those fighters when he did. Ciryl Gane came up. He beat the JDS after like a year or so in the UFC. He beat the JDS. He beat Derek Lewis, schooled him, picked him apart. He went 5 rounds with Ngannou. Arguably should have won. In like his second year of the UFC. You know? He's so new to the game as well. But it's just like, nope, only applies to Jon Jones. Only applies to Jon Jones. Strange.
Got to remember that was Jon Jones then, in his early 20s. Like, most people in their early 20s are not even in the UFC at that point, right? He was already dominating champions and making it look easy. Like, and if we just follow on, he should have lost against Santos and Reyes. No, actually,
No, he shouldn't have lost. I agree, he shouldn't have lost against Santos. He beat Santos, but it was a close fight. But no, actually, what does Dan Hardy have to say about this one?
He should have stopped both of them pretty comfortably. The fact that he had already checked out of his career by that point because he was...
Oh, it's so annoying, dude. It's so annoying. He was a focused Jon Jones, not going crazy, nutrition on point. It was just USADA was there. And he had close fights. It's not like, the fact that he was checked out of his career at that point. He don't just come back. His legacy's on the line. His belt's on the line. You think he's really like, nah, who cares? I'll just let him survive to a decision and make it razor close and gamble. He went to a split decision with Santos. And people are like, oh, yeah, he was just letting it. He let it happen. You know what I mean? Jones just let that happen. It's like this weird thing where if they admit, without all the delusion, that Jones looked the way he did in those fights, they can't talk about him as this holy god of MMA the way they love to. That's what it is, man. If they can't call him like, oh my god, he's such a goat, he destroys everyone. If they admit that he really is the guy that fought Dominic Reyes and Thiago Santos, they have to play this game of, but he should have finished both of them, but he was checked out of his career at that point.
He's having contract issues and
like every fighter.
Well, focus issues, basically. Let's just call it that.
Yeah, just focus issues, yeah.
It doesn't change the fact. He's still young. What is he? 20... What is he? 35, right?
Oh, that wasn't good. He's still young. What is he? 20? 35. Okay. What is he? He's a teenager, isn't he? 40. Oh, okay. Never mind. My bad. You know?
Well, focus issues, basically. Let's just call it that. It doesn't change the fact. He's still young. What is he? 20...
20.
What is he? 35, right?
35. Oh, he's 35 years old. Okay, cool. And he talks about how heavyweights have a later prime and goes on to talk about that type of stuff.
Career as a heavyweight and no one's going to be able to come close to him. And I don't care what people say about... Like, Dom Reyes can't beat Jon Jones 10 times out of 10.
He did beat him, though. So that's a time out of 10. He did beat him. So that wasn't Jon Jones in these people's minds. It's so exhausting. I can't imagine actually having to argue with someone. Being his co-host, picking Ciryl Gane, and actually trying to argue this. Because I'd just be interrupting like, he did beat him 1 out of 10. He beat him that time. And even if the decision didn't go to him, to say he can't beat him no times out of 10 he beats him. He doesn't beat Jon Jones ever. We just watched him do it. That wasn't Jon Jones, though. That was a different... it just wasn't him. What about the one against Santos? It wasn't him either. Must have been bored in that one. Oh, well. Never mind.
He was lucky that he got such a poor version of Jon Jones, because a better version of Jon Jones, the Jon Jones that fought Vitor Belfort, that's a different type of Jon Jones.
Okay.
No, it's not. That's a non-USADA Jon Jones. That's a non-USADA Jon Jones. And it's also, if you watch the Vitor fight, it wasn't even that great. Like, he survived the armbar. He got the sub afterwards on Vitor Belfort. Other than that, it's just that Vitor couldn't stop. Vitor's a middleweight. So is Shogun. They're all middleweight-sized men who had been over and they'd been sourcing off their tits. And Vitor was still sourcing as well. So fair play to Jon Jones for beating him. But they're just not. Dominic Reyes was 6'4", real athlete, coming in, ton of momentum, undefeated. Like, it was just a different person. People caught up to Jon Jones. You know what I mean? If that's the Jones that fought Vitor, there's no way. Like, no. People who have watched this sport for so long have such a weird fascination with the past of the sport. Like, it's like this was everyone was way better. No, Vitor couldn't stuff takedowns. You know what I mean? He just couldn't stuff takedowns. Dominic Reyes could. You know what I mean? Vitor didn't know how to get on the inside of Jon Jones on the feet. Dominic Reyes did. Because he had way better boxing. Way better takedown defense. 6'4", athletic. Not a 5'11", 6 foot light heavyweight that Jones is just going to walk down and beat up.
Okay, I'm going to drop some Usain Bolt knowledge.
And that's it for the video. No, there's another bit in the video, sorry. one last bit in the video that we got to go over. I don't know what this one even is, so this is a surprise that I've saved at the end.
Including himself. And the more creative ways that he can find to damage people, the better. Like, if everything's equal, the warlike mentality of Jon Jones wins this fight.
That warlike mentality, is it a warlike mentality, or did you just say that he was coasting to a decision and letting people survive in his other fights? The warlike mentality of Jon Jones to let Dominic Reyes go to a decision. To coast in the Santos fight. To not really even care that much about these other matchups. That's the warlike mentality Jones needs.
So if they're the same height, they've got the same reach, they're the same speed, they've got the same kind of conditioning, they've got all the same skills, Jon Jones is going to be the first person to bite a nose off in this fight. That meanness overrides. I just feel like it does. I feel like his presence is going to be something that Cyryl's not experienced.
He's been in there with Volkov, Derek Lewis, and Ngannou. He's been in there with round one and Ngannou. He's never felt this presence before. I mean, this guy got fucked up by Reyes. And Gun's never felt this before out there. I know he's been in the pocket trading punches with Derek Lewis, but trust me, I know he stood across with 6'7" Volkov, but trust me, he's never experienced the presence of Jon Jones, who lets people win. Like, it's just like, anyway, I'm ending this video. Had to get it off my chest. I don't know if I can't listen to people breaking down this fight. There are so many good reasons to pick Jon Jones. So many good reasons. And instead, I'm getting gobbledygook from all these experts. There are so many good reasons. He's going to be patient. He's got a different level of timing. The timing of heavyweights is different. Wrestlers, heavyweights can never wrestle. Look what DC did when he came up and just tipped over Derek Lewis and took down Stipe in their second fight and was able to get on top of him. Jon Jones hanged up well with DC in the wrestling. He's going to be able to topple over Ciryl Gane and get on top of him and find his moment and beat him up on the ground. Heavyweight jiu-jitsu is not the same as light heavyweight jiu-jitsu. Heavyweights aren't used to people taking their back. It's the reason why unathletic Fabricio Verdun was so good at heavyweight. Imagine if he was athletic and he could jump on a back and pounce on a back. Like, there are so many good arguments, but none of them are being made. Instead, we're just coping and being delusional about Jones. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle Pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.